So we spoke before about in the scenario that someone does get made redundant, despite
Yes.
all the payment options available, despite everything, the employer can't afford to keep them on, or the employee is not happy with what's on offer. Um,
Yep.
what are the implications for the employer? Can he be expecting a tribunal? Is there any fears there? Because there will be some employers that, despite the benefits available, they still cannot sustain employing people.
Absolutely. Whilst we try to look at it very positively because it's, I hate the whole doom and gloom and the approach. There will be redundancies and there are a lot. I have experienced certainly over the past since June. So it just started obviously we had the scheme back in March, but I started seeing redundancies come through in June. July was big on redundancies because I tell you how I can see that on settlement agreements, and I'll explain what those are. So if an employee, it's important that employer does go through a process. Furlough, COVID hasn't changed a process to make somebody redundant. The employment laws are still all in place.
Okay.
They still have to go through a genuine redundancy. So there has to be a genuine reason or a genuine redundancy situation. And, Section 139, I'm not going to read it, of the Employment Rights Act sets out the definition for redundancy. A place of work ceasing or going is expected to diminish or disappear. So closing a place of work down, for example. A restructuring, a reduction in numbers, significant reduction in hours. That is very grey because it's debatable as to whether you are consenting to changing the terms of your contract, or actually is your job going to cease to exist or disappear. So there's a again, each scenario is fact based. Once you've got through the reason as to why is this a genuine redundancy, then you move on to, for example, if you've got 5 roles and you've only got 3 of the same roles, then you've got to put everybody at risk. You've got to put them in a pool. You have to consult with them. You have to go through a selection process, a fair selection process, a transparent one. Let your staff see how you're selecting the scoring grid and when it's scored as well. Then you've got to make sure that they've been accompanied. Then you've got to make sure that when you're terminating, that you set out what they're getting. So what their statutory redundancy is, if it's enhanced, look at the contract, notice periods, holiday. People have accrued holiday during furlough.
Yes.
So, so one of the things that as a business that we've done, we've been planning for how people are using their holidays, because we don't want all the holidays to carry over next year, because how do we manage with the holidays next year? So one of the things people don't know is that you can ask your staff to take leave as long as you give them double amount of notice.
Okay.
A lot.
What is the standard notice?
So, for example, if it's 5 days, you want them to take 5 days holiday, you give them 10 days notice.
Okay.
Okay, so it's a double amount of notice, and you can take it back as well with the same kind of notice, same double amount of notice. So you've got to make sure that when you're terminating correctly with proper consultations. For example, 20 or more is reasonable. Consultations when you've got under 20, it's reasonable consultations. So I would recommend that you have a couple of meetings, couple of consultations before you get down to that final meeting when they're accompanied and their employment ends. Over 20, it's a minimum of 30 days
Okay.
of consultations, and over 99, it's a minimum. Sorry, 100. So 100 people, it is 3 months consultations before you can give notice to terminate. So you've got to make sure, and with the over 100, you have to then report it. There's a portal where you would set out the numbers that have been made redundant as well. So I guess that's what the government's using as their stats. But it's very important you follow the process. It's very important that you give them a right of appeal, because often people don't realise that they've got to have a right of appeal. You've got to ensure that they've been selected fairly. So not discriminatory, not because they're a woman, not because they're of their colour, race, religion, age, whatever it is, you've got to select them fairly. The other key thing to bear in mind is that to bring a claim for unfair dismissal, so let's say somebody's employment was terminated, the reason was redundancy, it wasn't done, or there wasn't a genuine redundancy. The difficulty is that the employee's got to have 2 years service. They have to be employed continuously with you for 2 years.
Okay.
But the risk for an employer is this. If that employee says, hang on a minute, you've only picked me because I am a female, because I'm the only female, and none of my male counterparts have been selected for this. To bring a claim for discrimination, you don't need any time limits. You don't need to have 2 years service. You can bring it from day one of your employment. So I would say whether 2 years or less or whatever it is, I would always recommend that you have a fair process. I also understand there's a commercial element to this, because one of the things, Abid, is businesses don't want to possibly do that 30-day consultation period.
Yes.
So how do we get around that? And this is how we get around that. Voluntary redundancies is one. So invite your staff to see if they want voluntary redundancies, because staff will often look at this and say, well, I'm going to be made redundant in 30 days. All right, fine. I would have had the benefit of 30 days salary because I would have had an income. But if as an employer, you might look at it and say, well, actually, we'll offer a payment in lieu if your contract allows it, for example, to not work out your notice.
Yeah.
So you can go sooner. From an employer's point of view, it could be good. From an employee's point of view, they're getting a bit of money up front without having to work and stay in the business. So they've got a little sum of money and they can go as well. And this is why we have what's called settlement agreements. And
Yeah,
very quickly,
I was gonna come on to that next.